critique should have been, I think, seems that Putin is playing the president. He's playing Zelensky. He's playing the European community and NATO. He is playing the world. I don't think he has any intention of meeting with Zelensky. I don't think he has any intention of ending this war. His intention is exactly what it was when the first time they invaded Ukraine, and then Ukraine was promised security guarantees, whatever the hell that means. You know, we say things, and it sounds great, but what the hell does it actually mean? Well, we gave them the security guarantees, and what happened? Well, Russia, just when he was ready, just marched right back out. And I think those of you who have been watching the chat probably are not surprised I am moving in this direction, because the day of the meeting in Anchorage, while they were meeting, they intensified their attacks on Ukraine. And the subsequent day, they intensified their attacks on Ukraine. And I wrote in the chat, and folks who are uninitiated, the chat is linked above. It's a Facebook Messenger chat for Critical Thinking Forum users. It's open 24/7. Feel free to join and participate. I use the terminology, Putin is flipping the finger at the world. And now, without question, because the president said as recently as yesterday that the Kremlin has indicated that Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky. And all the speculation was, well, where would they meet? Who would be there? Would Zelensky be safe? Because, you know, they tried to assassinate him. And all of that was wasted rhetoric, because he has no intention, in my assessment, of meeting with Zelensky. So today we learn, in spite of what the president said yesterday, the Kremlin has not formally agreed to meet with Zelensky. So it's all BS. Like most of the stuff that comes out of the mouths of politicians and diplomats, BS. It's totally meaningless, except it's not meaningless to the people who are being killed. And when we say people are being killed,
this is the Gary Baumgarten podcast
on
Clubhouse.
Something that we rarely talk about with specificity, but it is so necessary to do so. Unlike in Gaza, somebody tried to make a comparison. Unlike in Gaza, where Hamas was hiding behind civilians, do you go after them, or do you let them live and basically give up on the war because they're hiding behind civilians? So what Israel tried to do, as best as they could, with some success and with a lot of lack of success, they notified the people who were living or working or whatever in that facility were coming, get the hell out, and then they would attack. And of course, when they warned them, of course they were also warning Hamas. So many of the Hamas guys, as soon as the warning came out, you know, the people fled the building, and the Hamas people went underground, literally, to tunnels that went under the buildings. Okay, fine. But there was a reason, a rhyme, a reason, whether you agree with it or not, as to what he's doing in Ukraine. And if we want to have moral indignation about the way the Israelis are prosecuting this war in Gaza, and people have the right to take that position, whether I agree with them or not, they have the right to take that position. It's a legitimate position to take. Why are there not demonstrations on the street over what Russia is doing? Because there is zero justification for their attacking cities of Ukraine. There is a military force that's not hiding behind civilians. They are out in the open. They are at the front, and that's where the battle is supposed to take place. Although it should never be taking place, of course, because it's an invasion of a sovereign nation, but that's where the battle should be taking place. Where the hell is the indignation over that? So at a time when he is saying, oh, I want peace, and the President of the United States is saying, I think Putin really wants peace. I think Putin really wants peace. I think Putin really wants peace. Then why is he accelerating his attacks on the civilians? That's not an indication that he wants peace. And by the way, Leon Panetta said it best today in an interview on CNN. If Putin really wanted peace, he would agree to a ceasefire and then negotiate. That's how it's done. No, instead, he increases the attacks, and then they put out a statement accusing Ukraine of accelerating the war. That's exactly what the Kremlin did today. Point the finger at the victim. By the way, there's a parallel there when it comes to Israel, but we're not talking about Israel today, but I threw that in anyway because I felt like it. Putin does not want peace. Putin wants a military victory in order to get territory that he wants, and until Zelensky is willing to capitulate and agree to this so-called land swap, which is not a land swap, it's swapping occupied territory for unoccupied territory. That's what their vision of a land swap is. It's a land confiscation. They're attacking in one area that they could get in order to get Ukraine to agree, because they want this war to stop, Ukraine to agree to say, okay, stop. Give us our land back, and you just take our land over there, which is mineral rich. That's what's going on. Give Putin some creds. He's freaking brilliant. And there's been a lot of discussion about how easily Putin is playing Trump, and has always played Trump. A lot of people made that allegation. I don't know whether that's fair or whether the people who say that are saying it because they just do not like Trump and can't say anything positive about him. I will take Trump at his words and say that he wants to help negotiate. He said so, but I don't really care what his motivation is. If he's successful in helping broker a peace, all power to Trump. I'll give him tremendous credit for that, like I did for the Abraham Accords, which I believe were the brainchild of his son-in-law. But still, he had to sign off on it. It's his administration, his first time around. He deserves credit for the Abraham Accords. So I'm not suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, which really doesn't exist. But in this case, it's pretty obvious that Trump is being played by Putin. What did Putin get out of this? And two people the other day were dismissive at my suggestion that Anchorage was a photo op for Putin, who's trying to re-establish his image as a serious member of the international community leadership. And so he's greeted by an applauding President Trump on a red carpet, and then is given a ride in the Beast, and people say, that's no big deal. It's tremendous deal. And to Putin, it's sort of like the image of him riding bare-chested on a horse. Remember that? That's exactly what this is to Putin. So Putin got that out of it. Trump got the impression, and everybody's hopes got raised, that he was inching Putin closer to an agreement for peace. And remember, unlike Leon Panetta, unlike NATO, unlike the European Union, unlike Zelensky, who are all in accord that there has to be a ceasefire. Our president, who's smarter than anybody else, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, I'm quoting him. Okay, maybe there's sarcasm. Our president said, no, I don't want a ceasefire, I want a peace. And I think that Putin wants a peace. We don't need a ceasefire, we need a peace. Which I think is an indication of how naive he is about how these things work. I can't, unless there's malice involved in this. And then the next day, after all the others said, ceasefire, he comes out and he says, well, maybe I can go for a ceasefire. The person in control of all of this is this very smart, very conniving man. The guy who was the head of one of the most premier intelligence agencies in the world during the Cold War, Vladimir Putin. I can see it no other way. He's playing us all. In Gary's opinion, your opinion may be different. I'm going to find out why I call people in the order in which I see them, and today that order begins with Scott. Gary, great. Good to see the Congressman Kennedy, Congressman Kitover. It's a battle. It's a great renown. It's a great version of everything you did. It's fantastic. Okay. It's been said that Trump was said in this room just the other day that Trump has been battle tested negotiations in the Congressman New York City, whether or not Trump has been successful there, or he's rebranded and saved his financial empire through reality TV. Hey, Gary. Guy, in and out of Minneapolis all the time, working. Awesome. Yeah, I think I don't think it takes great geopolitical insight, negative political insight to see that it's winning the behavior that look. Gary, you brought something up about Trump not wanting a ceasefire, wanting a peace. I think there's something to that, and also I think Trump is focused on process, not substance. So I think rather than say we want like ceasefire or this, like the European leaders want, he said, oh, okay, yes, I met with, okay, we had a very good meeting. Now we're going to meet with Zelensky. Then we're going to meet here. And as if that just the meetings themselves are accomplishment. And that if you just sit down enough times, then there's some kind of automatic result. And that result is some kind of justice for peace. Right? And I say that again, justice for peace. Right? I mean, Martin Luther King said that peace is the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. Right? As you said earlier, this is an unjust war. This is illegal, unjust war. And any concession is a moral tragedy. I'm not saying that concessions may not be made, but as I said before, when some of these folks on the stage that pop in talk about the fact that we have to make concessions, they do a little twinkle in their eye. I almost like they're really fascinated. They don't say it's sad, it's tragic, but we might have. They're almost not getting the fact that they don't really agree as a prospect. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Putin is playing, or at least like
somebody posted that thing in 2013. Remember when Trump was holding the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow, and he tweeted out, I'm only, we're proved to 10 when he become my new best friend. This is a killer and a tragic and terrible person. In 2013, Trump wanted him to be his best friend. I mean, this is weird, right? I mean, that's strange. I don't think that was strange.
By the way, I think that Jeffrey Epstein was probably upset by that.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, he's got a lot of good girls. Yeah, I think he can close this. I don't know why people don't find out that like, yeah, I can shit somebody and I lose. Same with the guys, of course. He's right about that. Trump is right about many things. And one of the has been absolutely.
I think he said he would be arrested, and maybe now with the latest.
Straight. By the way, one of the finest looking people that ever been here. And Kristen Gobi is super attractive, so she had this fashionista kind of makeover. She was a much lovelier person as a governor. I thought her fashion sense and just her sensibility for makeup was just much better. To make sure Ukraine never enters NATO or the EU, and to make sure that he's got a weakened Europe, right? That his legacy is a sort of revived Russia, one that begins again to inspire his former the Soviet Union. And I think
like this is like he's running in the way that like some crazy and always runs Kitover. It's
a huge deal. And a huge deal. People die to get to the EU, right? Like despots always want the meeting, especially on U.S. soil, right? Because it grants legitimacy to people who are viewed as illegitimate. And so if you don't see what the big deal is, right? What's the big deal that gets the right partner? That's just how you negotiate. So no, it might be how you negotiate a merger between Hard Rock Coffee Cafe and Applebee's or something, right? But on the international stage, these things matter. These things are significant. Is getting things, concessions that are significant, while he's continuing to wage a brutal war. I mean, to me, this seems really good. Sometimes, Gary, we talk about very complex things here, and there are not easy answers. But this is not one of those days. He's playing Trump. He's playing him for his own immoral and unjust ends. There you go, Gary. That's my story. Stick it to it.
Thank you very much, Scott. And I just want to not be remiss by failing to give it to the head of Melania Trump for bringing to the world stage the question of the children who have been kidnapped by Russia. Her husband didn't do it, but she did, and now he's forced to address it. I believe that she's absolutely the lead on this. She wrote that letter to the Kremlin, begging Putin to release the children. I think she's heartfelt in that approach, and I want to give her a lot of credit. A lot of people have criticized her because she's been an inactive first lady, as if first ladies have some responsibility to be active. It's their prerogative whether they want to involve themselves in issues or not. It's not mandated that they do by any stretch of the imagination. But in this case, I give her a lot of credit for, and people who may have eluded them, that this is part of this war, that nobody's out on the street protesting against. On Columbia University's campus, in Times Square, at Harvard, at UCLA, at the University of Michigan, were the encampments demanding that the children be returned. I call on these people of goodwill to come out again and demand that the children be returned. next with hands up in the air when you follow me. Dave.
Yes, so Gary, we have an opportunity here, just like Israel fighting Hamas, as you say, communication warfare right now. Right now, we need to gear up the communication warfare. Just like you say, the world should recognize Putin has zero sincerity in having this talk. Because during the EU leader meeting at Washington, Putin already, organizing Belarus, about 40,000 rushing to the border with Ukraine. I don't know if you know about this. So absolutely a kind of middle finger to all the European leaders at Washington DC together with Trump. So what the US and Europe need to figure out is communication warfare. And I think today Trump called Victor Orban, seemed like after he spoke to Putin. And I think seemed like he's trying to urge Victor Orban that Ukraine join the EU as part of the process to increase the security of Ukraine. And I think Victor Orban might be the first, might be the country, Hungary, to organize the trilateral summit between US, Ukraine, and Putin. So these are ongoing negotiations, but I think the solution is this. Just like how Israel is handling the situation in the Middle East, there's only one language. In the Middle East, if you don't speak the Middle East language, just like the European has zero clue, just intervening and wasting time, that is not helping. And so the European has to learn how to speak about Putin is a big bully, and you need a way to deter the big bully and to tell the big bully we mean business. That means the next step is, the recent Macron, there's no the attempt to quickly encirclement, but I think that was quickly destroyed by the Ukraine. That was like 2 days ago. So just in case anybody can say Macron, this is 2 days ago. So the encirclement is totally destroyed. And so what I want to say is this: the Germany is talking about putting army, French is talking about putting army. I think the best way is to try to figure out a system to increase the number of Latin American countries fighting Ukraine. Right now we have about 3,000-4,000 Colombian fighting. I think we should try to have a very good scheme to encourage more Latino countries to come to Ukraine, increasing the number of Latino countries present there. Just having the number will immediately tell Putin we need business. And also instead of this Latino country coming to the US, now we come up with a good scheme for them to go to Europe. And I think we need to increase the number of military presence because Ukraine is winning. What we need is increasing the number of people on the field, just to showing the number is enough to tell Putin we need business. At the same time, Putin's oil refinery capability has been destroyed 10%. And so I think in the negotiation, US and Europe has to show like we're going to increase that to 20% by next week, maybe 30% by 2 weeks later. I think that would really help Putin we need business. And then we increase the communication warfare to address the populist population in Europe who tend to favor a little bit of Russia. So basically, just like Russia in Israel, identify the strategy of multi-front war and work on it one by one, just like what Israel has chosen. One of them is one. So here you bring up a very interesting point.
and I want to expand on it just a little bit, and that is, they're talking about any peace proposal must include security guarantees for Ukraine. And that means all these countries will ensure security for Ukraine. Now, what that exactly means, I don't know. Does it mean that they'll actually send troops? Does it mean that they will defer to UN peacekeepers who are not allowed to fire around unless they come under attack? So you can walk into a village that's being quote unquote protected by UN peacekeepers, and you can massacre people right in front of them. And so long as you don't shoot anybody wearing a blue helmet, you can do so with impunity. I don't think a lot of people understand that because we call them peacemakers. Okay, so wait a minute. Let me get to the question. The question is, why the hell, if people are talking about security guarantees for Ukraine in the future as part of a peace plan, do these nations have to wait for, you don't need Putin's agreement to provide security for Ukraine. It's happening now. It may or may not happen in the future following a peace. Knowing Putin and whoever the subsequent leaders of the Kremlin might be, based on past experience, it would just mean that they'll bide their time and invade again. But okay, why, if you're so concerned about a security guarantee for Putin, why don't you unilaterally, what do you need? I mean, for Ukraine, why don't you just unilaterally do it now? Why do you have to wait for Putin's approval? What is he, your daddy? So agree now. Changing his position from one day to the next. He said one day that he would consider sending U.S. troops in as part of a security guarantee. And then he said, no boots on the ground, but we'll provide air support. I don't know what air support means, but if it means dropping bombs on Russian troops, if you really are saying that that's what you're going to do, why wait? It's happening now. Why not? I know I'm going to sound like a warmonger here, and people are going to say, oh my God, if you do that, you're going to start a direct war between the United States and Russia, and you're playing around with an itchy finger on the nuclear bomb and all that kind of nonsense. And maybe so, but I'm just saying, then what, if that's your concern, based on what I propose, then that will be your concern the next time we go through this, security guarantees agreed upon or not, right? So what does it mean, air support? Why do we have to wait? When I say we, I don't mean the United States. I mean the world community. Yes, Dave.
All these European leaders, including Trump, they fear the most is putting boots in Ukraine because they fear the opposition coming from Democrats, coming from populist population in Europe. So that's why no waiting, Gary. Speak the language. That is immediately send Marco Rubio to Latin American country, figure out an incentive to bring as many Latin American trained soldiers now just to go there, just to be present there. Has no violation of NATO, nothing, but just to present there with the prospect that if they go through the program, they might allowed to stay longer and eventually become a European citizen. I think this is
listen, instead of rounding up all these illegal aliens and detaining them and throwing them out, why not create a mercenary force? And if they join the mercenary force and they go to Ukraine to fight the Russians, if they survive and they come back, then we fast tracked them to U.S. citizenship. How about that?
Those Colombians already there in Ukraine 3,000-4,000, right? They are, they don't speak Ukrainian, but the leader are trained. And
They don't actually speak Ukrainian. All they have to do is follow orders. Thank you, David.
But
Yeah, let's move on. I want to move on.
the important thing is just having enough number present there.
Got the point, and I underscored it for you, and we're going to move on. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
By the way, I've long said that if the illegal aliens were given opportunity to provide service to this nation, and it wouldn't have to necessarily just be in the military, but in other areas, as a path to citizenship.
I want to thank my good friend Scott for his reference to my forum and also for his reference to the beautiful women in the cabinet. I mean, we've had Frances Perkins, we've had Janet Reno, we've had Hillary Clinton. I mean, haven't you ever heard the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Okay.
That's interesting coming from you, but go ahead.
Okay. I accept your invitation. I appreciate being included in your forum. I would say sound is not the most important thing, but the UI to Clubhouse, and I hope what you're going to get it only affects it doesn't negatively affect your UI.
No, it's going to actually positively affect my able body. What it might do is degrade or improve, and I want to know. I just want an air check from you there, Alan. Just an air check.
That's actually a mic check. Okay, got it. Herman Cain. I'm thinking about publishing a story that Herman Cain died of Trump derangement syndrome. And if you think about this seriously, he actually did. He refused to get his COVID shots, and he died. And so I think Trump derangement syndrome may be fatal. So I'm not so sure that politics should be entertainment. When it is, people die. So actually, I think Trump derangement syndrome could have fatal results. I know you've got the candidate coming up. I do want it to be very clear that the candidate did say in my room that he thinks Trump should be impeached. And I do have it on tape. So you can't go back on that. There is a Republican who believes Trump.
I hope you guys hear that clip because I'm screaming my head off. I'm asking him if Congress should arrest and impeach Trump. He's like, yes. I cannot believe it, but Thomas Massey is currently on this guy's crazy exit code.
I don't. I mean, I can only speculate. I have thought that when they talk about victims, now they may consider some of these billionaires who got caught up in this to be victims because it would be embarrassing to them. Admittedly, the legislation that Rotana and I introduced, because we have to get 218 signatures, we did have to allow for exceptions for national security. But I think there's still a space in there where they are obligated to disclose if Epstein was part of our national security apparatus or Israel's national security apparatus. So I am concerned about the redactions. One question I don't know the answer to, but I suspect I do. I've got a suspicion of what the answer is. 10 members of the Oversight Committee go view the unredacted documents. So, for instance, Marjorie Taylor Greene's been a champion on this. She serves on the Oversight Committee. I used to serve on the Oversight Committee before I moved to Judiciary. But somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene go look at the unredacted documents if the DOJ didn't redact them, but the committee itself has redacted them. I don't know, but I suspect she could. And I suspect with a motion there when the Oversight Committee meets, they could probably grant, the membership could probably grant themselves access to the unredacted documents. And of course, they'd have to view those in some kind of SCIF type setting. It'd be interesting if the redactions were when they tested the
the screeners at airports what the rate of failure was. Now, that information was confidential, but it wasn't classified, for instance. So we could view it in a room. We didn't have to go to a SCIF. It'd be interesting to see what level of classification, if any, they try to apply to this. It's interesting. I mean, I'm just going on your word that they'll be redacted by oversight committee and not.
I was reading, that was the statement that the oversight, I'll put it up in the Jumbotron.
Here's something else in that same vein that's interesting. Former Attorney General Barr testified, and they didn't do that in an open hearing. They did it, it's in a closed room. And typically, if you're a member of that committee and you have enough heads up, you can go and you can attend those. I'm going to see if I can get some of my friends on the oversight committee to fly back in town and attend some of those other transcriptions, testimonies that happen behind closed doors. Because if you can't get the transcript of former Attorney General Barr's interview, it's almost like a deposition. If you can't get that, the next best thing is to be there, and you can actually ask questions if you're on that committee. So I'm going to encourage some of my colleagues to see if they
Is it not true? Okay, many citizens, U.S. citizens, don't know this, but Congress, particularly House members of Congress, have what is called ultimate free speech protections. And so what that means is that if they read something into the congressional record on the floor, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. That they are protected by that law, by the First Amendment. Did you know that?
It's not the First Amendment. It's called the Speech or Debate Clause, and it is in the Constitution. And so you have like super First Amendment powers if you're in Congress. There has to be a legislative nexus. It's been ruled to cover your committees or your staff. And committee staff, because they're part of Congress. In fact, it covers the Sergeant at Arms and the Capitol Police. This is why you can't subpoena them, or you can't do a FOIA request, for instance, on a congressman's emails. It's never happened. It will never happen as long as the Constitution stays that way. And it's an important, I know everybody tends to want Congress to live under the same laws as the rest of America, but our founding fathers decided that it was important that congressmen couldn't, for instance, be sued for defamation for anything they said on the floor of the House. They couldn't be put in jail for releasing national secrets if it's said on the floor of the House. And I know what you're thinking, but here's the problem. How do you get those documents to get them to the floor of the House and read them? They keep you from, I've been in SIFs, I've been in settings where there's only one copy of them and they prevent you from taking them out, and you're not allowed your phone in there. You can't even go in, take notes, and take the notes back home with you. I had this issue when we were trying to get a couple times to try to figure out what they had redacted and what the American public couldn't see that I could see. But they're just not going to let you have them as a member of Congress. Now, if there were one or two things specifically that you could memorize and then come back out and say, yeah, you can do that. You won't go to jail. You won't get a fine. You won't be sued. You won't even have to go to court because of the Constitution. The problem is then Mike Johnson or Hakeem Jeffries could say, we deem you trustworthy now, and we're not going to let you have access to any more of this information. And by the way, we are allowed, I don't even think...
So it would be career suicide?
No, there's things I've done that might be considered that, and it still hasn't happened. I don't think it would be career suicide. It's just something you would have to contemplate, and would it be worth whatever it is that you could remember in your head and bring to the floor, because you're not going to be able to come out with a binder full of documents.
Right. Thank you for that insight, because I've always kind of so many things get obfuscated through quote unquote national security
or classification. And we've seen, from government redactions over the years that they classify anything from, if they overclassify by a lot. We've seen instructions on how to operate a toilet at some point in time. So, this is a problem. Go ahead.
Well, ultimately, they can classify it as high as they want, but ultimately that belongs to Congress. Like, Congress paid for those documents, and we can get them. And then it becomes a matter of whether Mike Johnson and the committee chairman will let other members see them. And so it kind of grinds down into that.
Do you think that MTG is going to be able to get a look?
I don't know. I talked to her. I mean, I'll see if they can. There are other people they're going to call, and it might be the case that even if she couldn't be there, there might be other members who would be able to be there present. They schedule these depositions, by the way, at the most inconvenient time because they don't want rank and file members in there. Because if you're in that meeting, you can ask questions yourself.
Let me ask you real quick, what did you think about the exchange that went there? Comer put out a statement on what was said to a greater or lesser degree, and he pretty much, he said that Trump wasn't implicated, and then the Democrats were, it was really partisan on both sides, to be honest with you, I saw.
I thought the news reports were stupid. I mean, that was the headline. Trump is not implicated. Trump is not implicated. Well, we're not going after Trump. What we're looking for is justice for the victims. I never assumed he would be in there, but they somehow, I feel like that was a distraction to make that the headline, that Trump wasn't implicated. Well, that's not why we want these. Now, maybe some Democrats would hope and wish that he's implicated. In other space, Rokana and I have scheduled a press conference in front of the steps of the Capitol on September 3rd, when it's the first full day that Congress is back in session. I think it's at 10 a.m. when we're going to do that. We'll have survivors who've never spoken publicly before speak at that press conference. So here's the interesting thing about that. This puts to bed all those people who they're just throwing up smoke and mirrors, but they say, oh, Congressman Massey and Congressman Rokana, they're putting these survivors at risk. They want to expose them. Their legislation isn't crafted well enough to protect them. Well, if that were all true, why are survivors showing up at our press conference to try to help get our legislation passed?
That's exactly. The victims are definitely not getting justice here. And when I see the partisanship on both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, and what I think I see is a uniparty strategy to intentionally make this a partisan issue. That way people aren't focusing on the facts of the case and are perceiving it more as an attack by the opposition party. Right, and I can only imagine the amount of heat that you take when you were talking about, career suicide. Just in reporting on Epstein myself for the last 2 months, the amount of threats and the amount of heat I have taken, doxing attempts, harassment, you name it. I mean, you name it. People, Nazis on my stage. I have Senator Shane from Oklahoma. He's a state level senator. They've experienced some kind of weird intimidation. Ever since we started covering all of this.
Which part of this do you think I don't understand? When this stuff heats up, my phone battery life goes to about 15 minutes, and I can go sometimes 24 hours without even being able to read a text on my phone. There are times when there's a lot more scrutiny applied. And we'll see what happens. Definitely, they're keeping score the wrong way in D.C. I think some Democrats are keeping score by the number of times Trump's name might appear in the documents, and the Republicans are keeping score on if they could just completely avoid taking this vote and going on the record at all. And Speaker Johnson is acting like he's being persecuted here, which I think is totally ridiculous. The only reason he feels persecuted is he's got to decide between carrying water for this administration and being part of a cover-up, or being for the victims and transparency. And I think he sees it as his job to keep every Republican from having to actually pick between those two choices by expressing a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. That's why he didn't even bring, I suspect, well, there's a few reasons why he didn't even bring the fake resolution to release the Epstein files, the non-binding Pretty Please Mother May I resolution. He didn't even bring that to the floor, maybe because he realized that people would see through it, but more likely he didn't even want people to go on record with a fake resolution. And the fake resolution is full of flaws. It refers to Section 2 that doesn't even exist in the document. So that's another reason he probably didn't bring it to the floor. And finally, the fake resolution was more or less just to provide cover for people on the Rules Committee. There are 9 Republicans and 4 Democrats currently on the Rules Committee, and one of the Republicans voted for Ro Khanna's amendment to release the Epstein files, which left 8 Republicans exposed in that committee. So really the resolution, the fake resolution that Mike Johnson has, was merely, I think its entire shelf life and its entire reason to exist was to protect the 8 Republican members of the Rules Committee who had already taken a publicly toxic vote to give them some cover, and they realized that fig leaf might work for those 8, but it wasn't going to work for the whole House of Representatives.
And Representative Massey, I wanted to ask you about that. You know, you like you said, you have a bipartisan petition on the floor. Well, not in the floor, but in the works in the House right now. That you are hoping to have ready by the time you guys get back in session in September. Where is that? Where do you stand with that right now? Do you have all the signatures you need? Where does that stand?
So it's completely ready. It had to be ready the day we filed it. By the way, Speaker Johnson has tried to spread falsehoods about it. He said we didn't run it through Ledge Council. That's the Legislative Council. That's the nonpartisan part of Congress that reviews your legislation before you submit it to make sure you got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and your punctuation right. You're referring to the right section of law to modify if you're going to modify law. Well, number one, he can't know if we ran it through Ledge Council or not because they keep all that stuff private. And number two, we did run it through Ledge Council, and not only did we run it through Ledge Council, we ran it through the parliamentarian. So the stuff is done. It's finished. There are not mistakes in it. It takes 7 days to ripen according to the rules, and we had 6 legislative days, actually 5 because Mike Johnson released us early to get away from all this Epstein stuff. So the bill didn't have time to ripen, and so we couldn't collect signatures yet. But because they've been having these pro forma sessions, which is another sort of miniature scandal in its own, where Mike Johnson and Leader Thune, every 3 or 4 days, they hold a session with nobody there. And the entire purpose of gaveling in and gaveling out is to keep Congress from going into a real recess as defined by the Supreme Court in 2014 when, in Obama's case with National Labor Relations Board appointments, recess appointments. In any case, we're having these recess appointments at the behest of the leadership with nobody on the floor of the House, merely to keep we're having these pro forma sessions merely to keep Trump from making recess appointments. And Trump's not complaining about it. Nobody's talking about it. The reason I bring it up was, not to go down another rabbit hole, but to point out now 7 days have elapsed, 7 legislative days have elapsed, because every time they hold one of those, the kicker goes one day forward, even though they're not having real business on those days. So as soon as we get back, we can start collecting signatures. As soon as we get to 218 signatures, then it takes 7 more days, and then do it or mail it in. And you have to do it on the floor of the House of Representatives. If you're watching C-SPAN, you now that I know how it happens, you can actually watch people walk down there and sign this document at the clerk's desk. You'll see people doing that. And so 218 people have to sign the same document. And if every Democrat signs it, we need about 6 Republicans. And I have 12 co-sponsors. So even though I can't collect signatures yet, we can collect co-sponsors. And I've collected 12 Republican co-sponsors and a lot of Democrats. But if just 6 of the 12 follow through after co-sponsoring it and actually sign the discharge petition, then we're off to the races. And Speaker Johnson has 2 choices that I can see. He can either let this proceed to the floor for a vote, a debate and a vote. There will be a debate, then there'll be a vote. Or he can use the Rules Committee, which means he's got to get it through 9 Republicans and 4 Democrats there. If 3 Rules Committee members defect, he's got a problem. 3 Republicans defect. And I'm hoping there would be 3, but in the Rules Committee, he could write a special rule to turn off this discharge petition power for the purposes of the resolution I've introduced. But he would still have to get a majority of votes in the Rules Committee to get it to the floor. And then he has to get 218 votes on the floor. And you might say, well, why would anybody vote for that if they're in favor of releasing the Epstein files? Well, it's because they may hide it in another piece of legislation. There may be one sentence in an otherwise very popular bill where they change the rule to turn off the vote on the Epstein files to keep it from ever being a vote. But this is where everybody needs to pay attention. We will sound the alarm. We won't have much time if he tries to go down that path. And then that roll call vote becomes the vote of record on when the Epstein files got swept under the rug in the House of Representatives.
And what's the time frame there, if you can just estimate?
That's probably a couple of weeks after we come back. So I would say mid-September is when either the chicanery happens on the part of the speaker or we have a legitimate debate and a vote.
Okay, well, and what can we do as constituents for our representatives, either Republican or Democrat? Because this is a nonpartisan issue as far as I'm concerned. You know, I voted for Trump. I advocated for other people to vote for Trump last year. I'm a registered Republican, and you know, for me, when there was a delineation and a deviation away from truth and transparency when it came to the Epstein files, that's when I started to have a much more scrutinous eye on not just the Trump administration, but also the Republican Party and Congress, and Democrats for that matter. I started to look at a far more scrutinous light.
Beautiful bill. They were worried that there would be cuts to Medicare in the big, beautiful bill. I'm telling you this to let you know the signal to noise ratio on phone calls is pretty good. If you got 3 of your friends to call your congressman and ask them to co-sponsor my bill during the August recess, and then once we're back in September, starting on September 3rd, the request should no longer be to co-sponsor the bill. The request should then transition to, would you sign the discharge petition on the Epstein files? You don't need to remember the HRES or HR number. It's HRES 581, but ask them, would you sign the discharge petition on the Epstein files? And don't call Nancy Pelosi or the other reps in your state that you can't vote for, because we do have caller ID and the people are going to look it up, see if you're an actual constituent. And they'll let you talk, but then they're not going to write anything down to pass on to the congressman. So only call your rep. It's only one phone call. Until September 3rd, ask them to be a co-sponsor. Once we hit September 3rd, ask them to sign the legislation. And then once we get 218 signatures, they don't need to sign it anymore. Transition to asking them to vote for the legislation when it comes to the floor. So it's 3 different asks depending on what stage we're in. But right now it's the co-sponsor stage. The next one will be please sign it stage, and then the third stage will be please vote for it.
So then every time I host a space about Epstein, my ask will be please call your representative and co-sponsor Representative Massey and Khanna's bill about the release of the Epstein files. And then I will use September 3rd as a lightning rod, especially when we have the victim statements up there. I'll host a space. I'm going to cover that event in Spaces. I might even come to DC in person. We'll see. And we will use that as a lightning rod for people because I imagine that there's going to be new victims there, according to what you guys say, sharing their experiences and what they've gone through. And we're talking, the government has admitted there's over 1,000 victims of Epstein that they admit to. Over 1,000. And we always know that's only the tip of the iceberg. You know, every time that there's a crime like this, or these kind of crimes have occurred, it's always the tip of the iceberg. And go ahead.
Well, there's a good point in what you just said. Over 1,000 victims of Epstein. Well, really, is he the only perpetrator? And Maxwell? No. This is the ridiculousness of their position. Is that there, are hundreds of victims, and that only 2 people have been prosecuted. And that's what we're looking for. Is prosecutions ultimately, and to know really who was Epstein and what was he doing on behalf of who. And so the other thing is, this is just sort of easier. As you can imagine, there are people who've approached me through secure channels about things they know once I introduce this resolution, and there will be more information to come out in the media that's going to make it harder for the administration to call this a hoax. There will be more information dropped. They'll try to sweep it under the rug, but I don't think they're going to be able to. There's at least 2 things that come out. I mean, one thing is going to make the denier's job a lot harder, and that's all I can say about that. But
Wow! Breaking right here. The X Spaces. Wow!
Breaking teaser, right? I didn't give you anything real other than there's more coming out. It's just going to be, just like having the survivors come to Capitol Hill and testify publicly in front of cameras. What are they going to, what moral human being is going to, later that day, walk to a podium and say this is a hoax? They can't. And so, and there will be more things like that come out in September as this heats up.
You alluded to the obfuscation of potential foreign involvement when it comes to Epstein in this operation, and that brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the Las Vegas case that occurred this month. It really got a lot of traction in a bad way for the administration. And, this Israeli cyber official was caught up in a sex ring sting in Vegas that was at the federal, state, and local level, a task force that was that combined all of those elements. And he was allowed to leave on a $10,000 bail and leave the country when he's a foreign national and he did not have diplomatic immunity. And the similarities between the Epstein case and this particular case, especially right now, are striking to me. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I waited a few days before I did post about it because I wanted access to the primary sources. And then when I saw the police records and the interview summary, that's when I put something on my page. Because every time I see something like this, I have to treat it as maybe, the meme, that's bait, where he's pointing at something. I have to treat it as an effort to discredit me if I amplify it.
I approach it the same way, Mr. Massey.
If it turns out not to be
true. So in this case, it turns out to be true. In fact, to a degree that the State Department had to put out a statement, which may or may not be true, saying that they had nothing to do with it. Now, whoever put out that statement may firmly believe that the State Department had nothing to do with it, but it might be a case where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And the real question is, why did they allow it to happen? How did this happen? And I do agree with you that this alleged perpetrator, he's innocent until proven guilty. But the
100% he is.
Yeah, but the alleged perpetrator is. I've always said there's this category of people. They're either rich, powerful, or politically connected. And in this case, this individual doesn't seem to be rich or powerful, but he was politically connected, and so he got to leave the country. I guess the proof is in the pudding. Does he come back for the court case? I wouldn't want to be the person who wrote his bail, though.
No, and then can you give us? You said that you've seen from primary sources.
I shared. I can't remember the individual's name, but he did a video, like a 9-minute video with the police reports and stuff, and you can read them right there on the screen. But if you go, and I think the other story here is there's an individual who claims that his posts got deleted, like dozens of posts about this topic. Just
in the conversations with Grok.
Not just those. I think even Grok's going to get frustrated eventually with all his lobotomies that keep occurring. But when he starts speaking, it seems to be too close.
I have developed a framework to solve for that. It's pretty honest.
I saw that. It's like you kind of cut and paste like 1,000 words or something.
It's a wall of text. And as a matter of fact, it's so advanced now that even Grok is telling me, they're like, don't release it. We'll release the smaller version because the state can actually use it to find holes in their narrative going forward. Their stories are much more believable when the primary evidence doesn't match up to what they're trying to sell you. And about that, I looked at that guy's statements, and the problem with me was, do I believe it's possible? I definitely do, but if I'm being objective here, it needs to be independently verifiable, like you said, primary sources. That's how I operate, and I couldn't, there's no way to independently verify what he was saying about the deletions, because if you have a conversation with Grok and then you delete the post that you summoned it with, Grok automatically deletes all of its responses to that post. So that's kind of what happened. That could have happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there either, but if true, it's concerning. But I don't know.
I don't even think you need to they don't even need to be that extra about it. It's such a bad look for the administration on its face, right? Like, I don't think that. Go ahead.
Then it begs the question: how many times has this happened? Is this the default state for somebody from Israel? Can they just go back to Israel if something like this happens?
It's interesting that you bring that up. So when that occurred, I used my framework in Grok and was able to pull up 11 cases of this happening with domestic and foreign individuals in the last 5 years alone, where similar circumstances, they were charged on CSAM or meeting with minors, etc. And then the charges were buried. The cases were sealed. And never getting sealed ever since, so highly redacted. But there's 11 occurrences. Some of them have to do with, there was a foreign national from the UN in New York that it occurred with a couple of years ago. There was a tech bro in Silicon Valley that it occurred with a few years ago who was from the United States. There was an Indian national who was a tech bro that this happened with in California a few years ago, where the case was brought up. It got buried by the DA or whatever, and then it was buried. And then the case remained sealed and heavily redacted, and the individual never got sentenced or anything like that. So I'm seeing a reoccurring pattern here, not just with Israel, but also with other high-level or high-profile individuals.
Well, now that you mention it, do you remember that I think it was Debbie Wasserman Schultz and about a dozen other Democrats used the same outside consultants to do their congressional IT work? I'll butcher the name, but like Aswani Brothers or something. Any case, it seems like they were laundering money through a car lot or something. They were definitely like buying iPads for $999 or $499, whatever the limit was for congressional oversight, and then selling them for cash. They were able to flee to, I think it was Pakistan. So this is, and nobody stopped them. So this has happened before.
Definitely, it definitely has. Are you up to answering some questions from the panel?
You pick three, and I'll answer them, and then I've got to run.
Right. And I just want to thank you. First of all, I knew the kind of heat that you took, but now that I have been covering Epstein for 2 months in a way that went against the grain, I have a new appreciation for the level of heat that you take, and you continue to work for the will of the people, sir. And so my respect for you has grown exponentially, and I just want to say thank you. Really, I mean that wholeheartedly.
By the way, shout out to my colleague Marjorie Taylor Greene. As soon as she started speaking out on these topics, now they're trying to make fake claims of insider trading and all of this ridiculous stuff. I mean, we file financial disclosure forms, and she and her husband ran a very successful construction company, which I've known about for as long as she's been in Congress. She's talked to me about it, and that's on her disclosure forms. They're trying to make it sound like she's one of these people who came to Congress poor and became a multimillionaire through insider trading. But notice, all of that started when she started, looking into this and saying things that other members won't say. And it's it's happening on X. The people are paid, they're paid accounts. It's pretty darn obvious. Some of these influencers are paid to put out a narrative, and they're on a payroll that includes the same people who are interested in APAC financing. By the way, one final thing before we go to questions. So right now I've had, since July alone, and it's 8 months until my primary election, I've had $2 million spent against me. We won't know how much money from whom has been put into it between July 1st and December 31st until January. That's when we'll get the next finance report on the super PAC. But the one super PAC finance report we have, where it was financed with $2 million, shows that there are 3 billionaires who gave to the super PAC that is trying to smear my name. They're trying to recruit an opponent. They don't have anybody yet. And one of these is Miriam Adelson. She's a dual citizen, and